Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Power Vacuum. I'm your host, Belmont, and it seems Nintendo and its eternal struggle to be the bad guys versus the good guys, they can't make up their mind, has made another bad guy move. We got this story from Games Radar. This is another attack on physical media. Watchdog Group finds that Super Mario Bros. Wonder is suddenly unplayable on Switch 2 without an online update. Nintendo crossed the line. Nintendo crosses lines on a daily basis. Huh. Oh, I love it. That's the thumbnail right there. Uh Physical media enthusiasts have been closely eyeing the Switch 2 as they try to figure out how viable the platform is as an entirely offline machine, and thus how easy it'll be to keep using it, and not just the years but the decades to come. The latest Switch 2 firmware has a worrying caveat, as it's completely disabled access to Super Mario Bros. Wonder without an additional patch. Can confirm that Nintendo disabled offline playability on Switch 2 for Super Mario Bros. Wonder's card between firmware 20.11 or 20.1.1 and the current 20.2.0. According to Physical Media Watchdog, Does It Play on Blue Sky, updated one of our European Switches, and now the EU card of Wonder won't start either. Tested several other first party titles, no change there. I can confirm the same thing happened on a North America Switch too. With the latest firmware installed, I turned off my internet connection, popped my Mario Wonder card in, and upon trying to launch the game, it was hit with an unskippable update prompt. Switch 1 backwards compatibility has been the biggest roadblock to offline Switch 2 players, since the feature required a firmware update, which up until this week you would have had to download. Donkey Kong Bonanza didn't include that firmware update on cart, but it turns out the newly released Switch 2 edition of Super Mario Party Jamboree does, offering a way to get backwards compatibility without going online. Unfortunately, it also breaks the option to play Mario Wonder offline. Nintendo Cross the Line, Does It Play? Says in a follow up post, having a question mark in your name makes it difficult to read sentences in a proper manner because my brain, with its analytical English text, wants to stop that as a sentence. But that's part of their name, I guess. Does it play with a question mark, right? Does it play with a question mark? That's obnoxious. Um, our findings show they have the power to retroactively block legally bought physical games from working without updates, and they did so multiple times following the introduction of Trojan Horse Game Key Card. This is another attack on physical media. So I'm going to stop for a moment. You should be happy that the system is backwards compatible at all. Remember when you bought a Super Nintendo and you could play Nintendo Entertainment System games on it? Oh, no, you don't, because that never happened because they weren't compatible. Remember when you bought a 64 and you could just pop your SNES game into it? No, you don't, because that wasn't possible because they weren't compatible, right? Remember when Nintendo first switched to disc systems in the Wii? And everyone was like, "Whoa, they're upgrading to disc." And then Nintendo was like, "Yeah, fuck it, we don't like disc. We're going back to cards for the Switch." And you could just pop your disc into the back of the Switch. Oh no, you couldn't do that because they weren't compatible. The fact that they let it be compatible is amazing in and of itself. Requiring an update seems irritable and annoying, but it doesn't seem out of the realm of absurdity, or out of the realm of reality. Like, that's a very simple solution. Now, if it requires a connection once the update has happened, that's a different story because now they're saying you have to be online to play offline games, which is a huge issue with me. Don't sell me an offline game if I have to have an internet connection. But if it's just a simple update, who gives a fuck? Update your console, right? And if Mario Party does come with an update that does let you bypass the online activity, but it's saying it breaks your Wonder, I don't know. Let's keep reading. Maybe I'm just reacting too soon. Today, the issue won't matter for the vast majority of Switch 2 players. It's not that hard to find a Wi Fi hotspot in 2025 after all. But these kinds of little compatibility issues are starting to become a nightmare on decades old consoles with online features. And someday, when the Switch 2 is itself a retro console, it's going to be a lot harder to access all its features than you might like. Here are the upcoming Switch 2, and I don't care about those. So, all right, what's the issue? Are they saying, and they did so multiple times, so this doesn't address whether or not you have to maintain online connectivity. Based on the information here, it sounds like you just have to update your console, then you can play your offline mode with your old games. Then update your fucking console. Quit your bitching. That's not that big of a deal. To have to connect to the internet one time to update your console to play retro games, to play old games from an old console is not that big a deal. It's just not. This is an overreaction in my mind. This is why um headlines can be misleading. That's why I read these things live because I like to think about it and unfold it as it happens. I don't want to know, like I don't know. I don't read things ahead of time because I want my reactions to be genuine. And I don't want to feel like I'm doing a scripted video because I don't do scripted videos. The only time I do something close to a scripted video is when I'm doing reviews. I write down a couple of notes. That's about it. I don't write down dialogue or script. I write down pros and cons of the episode or likes and dislikes, and I put a list down. I'll have the list in front of me when I read it to make my points. Because if I don't have a list when I'm doing reviews, I'll go off on crazy tangents, hours. Let's see. We got some reviews here or comments. Let's see if they shed any light on the situation. So I'm supposed to be outraged because some future person might buy a used Switch 2 so far into the future that might not be able to play Switch 1 games on it because Nintendo servers might be shut down. This person isn't me because I already have a Switch. Okay. Replying to him, in my case, my home IP options are limited to exactly one single provider and it crawls, often at a dial up pace. Don't lie, dude. Don't lie. You weren't there for dial up if you're saying this shit. Seriously, I can constantly experience timeouts just waiting for email to load. There's no hope of new IPs in the area anytime soon either. Where do you live? Fucking the Philippines on the edge of the island? This is annoying, but it was designed for the OG Switch. Do you want a promise that it will also work on the Switch 2 in 27 years? There is never a guarantee that any games will be able to play on the next gen system. My DS games couldn't play on my OG Switch. Yes, it's annoying, but let's keep things in perspective. See, that guy's on the same page as me. Like, you don't understand how great it is for a company to just be like, "Hey, you can play these old games on the new console." Like there's a reason certain PS3s are worth thousands of dollars, right? Because they're fully backwards compatible. You can just pop a fucking PS2 or a PS1 disc in it and it plays. No updates, no internet connection. And these consoles still worth tons of fucking money because of that, right? They're almost worth as much as the PlayStation 3s that still have active running copies of PT downloaded on them. Which, if you buy one of those, just don't ever make the mistake of connecting it to the internet because Konami and Sony will purge it from your console, and then you'll just have a $2,000 doorstop. Your product still functions, nothing was bricked. A patch for the game to make it compatible with new firmware was released practically alongside the firmware update. If you're connected your console to the internet to download the new firmware, for what sensible reason would you not also download the game patch? Yes. See, okay. So from what I'm gathering, is it's just an update. So this article is kind of like complaining about basically nothing because you just update your console. If you don't have an internet connection or access to the internet in this day and age, what are you doing buying like a $500 console? Just out of curiosity. Like what's the goal of spending that much money? That's right there. That's 5 months of internet on like a decent plan. You can get cheaper internet. Shit, I think Starlink is probably cheaper than a Switch 2. In which case that lets you have internet wherever the fuck you are on the planet right now. So This article is kind of like a nothing burger to me. It doesn't seem like anything bad's been happening. Doesn't seem like Nintendo's making a negative move here. They're just saying update your console if you want to play Switch One games. That's not that big a deal. This isn't Nintendo being the bad guy. This is somebody trying to make them the bad guy, which is really easy to do right now because they're making a lot of bad guy decisions, but this isn't one of them. And that's all I have for this story. This is your host, Belmont, signing out.